The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent, except for the soft hum of translation devices. Hundreds of different alien species sat in curved rows of seats that stretched up toward a dome ceiling. Their eyes, tentacles, and sensing organs, all focused on the witness stand in the center of the room. ZYX9471 stood there, his tall insect-like body trembling slightly. His 4 arms were folded against his chest, and his multiple black eyes darted nervously around the room. The Carillion looked like a giant praying mantis, but his proud posture was gone. He had been broken by what he had seen. "Begin your testimony," said the council speaker, a blob-like creature whose voice came through speakers around the room. ZYX-9471 clicked his mandibles together, a sign of distress among his kind. 3 years ago, my people made the worst mistake in our history. We met the humans. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many species had heard whispers about humans, but few knew the full story. The Carillion Empire ruled over 47 worlds. ZYX9471 continued. We were feared across 12 star systems. We had conquered races that were stronger, smarter, and more advanced than us. We thought we were the apex predators of the galaxy. He paused, his breathing making a whistling sound through the holes in his neck. Then we detected a small ship near the edge of our territory. It was primitive, slow, and clearly belonged to a species that had just learned to travel between stars. The ship was called Terra Nova, and it carried 37 members of a species called humans. The alien's voice grew quieter. Captain Jake Morrison tried to talk to us. His ship sent messages in over 200 different languages and mathematical codes. They wanted peace. They wanted to trade knowledge and become friends. ZYX9471's head tilted downward. We laughed at them. These soft, pink creatures with only 2 arms and 2 eyes. They had no claws, no natural armor, no venom. They were obviously prey animals that had somehow learned to use tools. The council speaker leaned forward. What did you do? We did what we always did with weak species. We attacked. The Carillion's voice was barely a whisper now. We destroyed their ship and captured the survivors. We brought them back to our military base on Keros Prime for study. The alien's 4 arms began to shake. That was our first mistake. We thought we were capturing helpless prey. We had no idea we were taking prisoners of war. He looked up at the assembled council. The humans were strange from the beginning. When we put them in cages, they did not cry or beg like other species. They watched us. They learned our routines. They talked to each other in whispers, and we could see them planning something. ZYX9471 turned to face different sections of the audience. Our scientists wanted to study human biology. They said humans were fascinating because they could survive in conditions that would kill most other life forms. Their bodies could adapt to different temperatures, pressures, and even toxic environments. The Carillion's voice grew stronger, but there was fear in it. Commander Lisa Blake was the leader of the human prisoners. She was a small female with brown hair and green eyes. She looked weak, like all humans do, but there was something in her eyes that should have warned us. He paused to take several deep breaths. She watched our guards for 3 weeks. She never spoke to them or showed any emotion. She just watched. Then one night, she killed Guard Commander Vex 223 with a piece of metal she had pulled from her cage. The crowd gasped. Vex 223 had been a famous Carillion warrior, known for his strength and speed. The human female used a sharp piece of metal like a knife. She was faster than Vex 223, even though she looked slow and weak. But that was not the worst part. ZYX9471's voice dropped to almost a whisper. She did not make any sound when she killed him. No battle cry, no roar of victory. She just did what needed to be done. The alien's multiple eyes closed for a moment. She freed the other prisoners, and they fought their way to the transport bay. But here's what we could not understand. When they reached the ships, Lake made sure all the other humans escaped first. She stayed behind to fight our reinforcements, even though she knew she would probably die. Zix9471 looked directly at the council speaker. No Carillion would do this. We are survivors. We save ourselves first, always. But this human female was willing to die for her people. We had never seen such behavior. The alien's voice became stronger. Blake did not die that night. She stole one of our transport ships and escaped. She took weapons, food, and our navigation data. But she also took something else. She took 3 of our wounded guards to the nearest medical station and left them there with a message. The council speaker asked, "What did the message say?" It said, "These soldiers were just following orders. They deserve medical care. We are not monsters." ZYX9471's head tilted in confusion. She showed mercy to enemies who had tortured her people. We could not understand this. The Carillion looked around the room. We sent word to the High Command that the human prisoners had escaped. We expected orders to hunt them down and recapture them. Instead, we received a very different message. He paused for effect. The humans had found us first. Blake had somehow contacted her people and told them where we were. 3 human ships appeared in our system within days. They did not attack immediately. Instead, they sent a message. Zix9471's voice became steady, but there was deep fear in it. Captain Jake Morrison, the same human we had captured, spoke to us from the lead ship. He was alive. His people had rescued him from our prison. He said, "You took our people. You hurt them. Now we want them back. Give us our prisoners, and we will leave in peace." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly. Our high command laughed. 3 small human ships against our entire battle fleet. It seemed like a joke. Admiral Krex 449 sent a reply. "Your people belong to us now. Leave our space or we will capture you too." ZYX9471 looked up at the ceiling. That was our second mistake. We thought we were dealing with a weak species that would run away when faced with superior force. We had no idea that we had just declared war on the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The Carillion's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The humans did not run. They did not try to negotiate. Jake Morrison sent one final message. "You have chosen war. We will remember this." The alien looked around the room one more time. That was 3 years ago. Today, the Carillion Empire no longer exists. Our 47 worlds are ruins. Our mighty fleets are scrap metal floating in space. And I am the only survivor who can tell you how it happened. The Great Hall was completely silent. Every being in the room stared at the broken Carillion who stood before them. The humans kept their promise, ZYX9471 said. They remembered everything. ZYX9471 shifted his weight from one leg to another. His multiple eyes looked around the council chamber before focusing on the speaker again. The silence stretched for several seconds before he continued his testimony. After Captain Morrison sent his final message, we expected the 3 human ships to retreat. Any normal species would have seen our superior numbers and fled. We had 40 battle cruisers in that system alone. The humans had 3 small exploration vessels. The Carillion's mandibles clicked softly. Instead, the human ships spread out and began scanning everything. They studied our ship designs, our weapons, our formation patterns. They acted like they were planning an attack, which seemed impossible. He paused to take a deep breath through the holes in his neck. Admiral Krex 449 decided to end the standoff quickly. He ordered a full assault on the human vessels. Our ships moved in perfect formation, just like we had done 1,000 times before against other enemies. ZYX-9471's voice grew quieter. They, human ships, did something we had never seen. Instead of fighting back or running away, they sent out small pods in all directions. These pods exploded and released clouds of metallic dust. Our sensors were blinded. The alien looked directly at several council members. In the confusion, the human ships disappeared. Our admiral was angry, but he declared victory. He said the cowardly humans had run away and left behind worthless decoys. The Corellian's head tilted downward. We were wrong again. The pods were not decoys. They were recording devices. While we celebrated our easy victory, the humans had copied all our tactical data. They knew how we fought, how we moved, and how we thought. ZYX-9471's voice became stronger. 3 days later, we learned what the humans had really done. Ships began arriving in our outer systems. Not human ships, but cargo vessels, passenger, transports, and civilian craft from all over human space. The aliens' 4 arms gestured weakly. We could not understand what was happening. These were not warships. They were ordinary civilian vessels. But as we watched, the humans began changing them. He looked up at the domed ceiling. The cargo ship New Hope was typical. It carried farming equipment and food supplies. Captain Amy Turner and her crew worked for 18 hours straight, removing the cargo and installing weapons. They welded armor plates over the hull and added shield generators. ZYX-9471's mandibles clicked rapidly. In 2 days, the New Hope had become a battle cruiser. It was crude and ugly, but it was armed with weapons that could punch through our heaviest armor. And there were hundreds of ships like it. The Corellian's voice dropped to a whisper. We sent scouts to observe the human fleet. What they reported back terrified our high command. The humans were not just building warships. They were building them wrong. Several council members leaned forward with interest. Our warships are designed by committees of experts. Every system is tested and perfected over many years. Human ships looked like they had been built by insane engineers. ZYX-9471's eyes darted around the room. They had weapons pointing in every direction. Some ships had no shields but carried massive guns. Others were covered in armor but had tiny weapons. The aliens' breathing became more rapid. Our military analysts said the human fleet would destroy itself in the first battle. The ships had no standard design, no coordinated tactics, no unified command structure. It was chaos. ZYX-9471 paused for several seconds. General Nathan Cross was appointed as the human supreme commander. He was an old human male with gray hair and scars on his face. He looked like he had been in many battles. The Corellian's voice became steadier. Cross sent a message to all. Corellian forces. It was very simple. Return our people unharmed, and we will discuss peace terms. Refuse, and we will take them back by force. He looked around the chamber. Our high command laughed again. They sent back a message showing our human prisoners in cages. The message said, "Come and take them, if you can." ZYX-9471's head drooped. That was our third mistake. We thought we were dealing with an undisciplined mob. We had no idea that chaos was the human's greatest weapon. The alien's voice grew stronger. The first battle happened at Zarian Station. We had 200 ships defending our main supply depot. The humans attacked with 73 vessels, all different designs and sizes. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. Our fleet moved in perfect formation, just like we always did. The human ships came at us from every direction at once. Some flew straight at our guns. Others hid behind asteroids. A few even flew backwards while shooting. ZYX-9471's mandibles clicked softly. Our computers could not predict what the humans would do next because they had no pattern. Every ship fought differently. Every captain made their own decisions. The Carillian's voice became quieter. Captain Amy Turner rammed her converted cargo ship into our command vessel. She destroyed both ships, but it broke our formation. In the confusion, smaller human ships slipped through our defenses and hit our supply depots. He looked around the room. We won that battle. We destroyed most of the human fleet, but they accomplished their mission. They took back 50 human prisoners and stole half our supplies. ZYX-9471's breathing made a whistling sound. But the worst part was what we found afterwards. The humans had left behind small devices on our surviving ships. We thought they were bombs, so we sent our best engineers to remove them. The alien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They were not bombs. They were speakers. And they began playing sounds that drove our crews insane. Several council members made sounds of confusion. The humans had recorded our fear pheromones during the battle. They knew the exact chemical signals that meant terror, panic, and death. To our species, ZYX-9471's 4 arms wrapped around his torso. The speakers played these signals continuously. Our crews could not eat, sleep, or think clearly. The Carillian looked directly at the council speaker. Within a week, 3 of our battle cruisers were found drifting in space, completely abandoned. The crews had fled in escape pods, leaving behind perfectly functional warships. ZYX-9471's voice became stronger again. That was when we realized we were fighting an enemy that understood warfare in ways we could not imagine. They did not just want to defeat us. They wanted to break our will to fight. The alien's head tilted upward. Human soldier Ben Davis led boarding parties that would capture our ships without killing anyone. They would sneak aboard, disable the crew with sleep gas, and then reprogram our computers. When our people woke up, their own ship systems would play fear pheromones at them. He paused for effect. Entire Carillian fleets began surrendering without firing a shot. Our proud warriors became afraid of their own vessels. ZYX-9471's mandibles clicked rapidly. Colonel Rick Hayes developed what the humans called ghost protocols. Small teams of humans would infiltrate our ships, move through the ventilation systems, and appear in random locations. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. They did not kill our crews. They would leave behind human items. A piece of clothing. Here, a food wrapper there, a human scent in the air. Our people began to believe that humans could appear anywhere, anytime. The Carillian looked around the chamber one more time. Our ships became haunted. Crews reported seeing human faces. In dark corridors, strange sounds came from empty rooms. Equipment would malfunction for no reason. ZYX-9471's voice became barely audible. The humans had turned our own imagination against us. We became afraid of shadows, afraid of silence, afraid of our own ships. The alien straightened his posture slightly. That was when our high command made the decision that doomed our entire species. They decided that if humans wanted to play psychological games, we would show them what real terror looked like. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. We began targeting human civilian populations. We thought this would break their spirit and force them to surrender. ZYX-9471's voice dropped to a whisper. We were wrong again. Instead of breaking the humans, we had awakened something far worse than anything we had faced so far. The great hall remained silent, waiting for the alien to continue his terrible story. ZYX-9471 stood motionless for several moments, his breathing making soft whistling sounds. The council chamber remained silent, waiting for him to continue. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The attack on New Terra Colony was supposed to break human morale. Our fleet commander, Admiral Vex 882, chose it because it was a peaceful farming world with no military defenses. 2 million human civilians lived there with their families. The Corellians' forearms trembled slightly. We bombed their cities. From orbit. We destroyed their farms, their schools, their hospitals. We thought the humans would see the destruction and surrender to save their remaining people. His multiple eyes closed briefly. The human response arrived 6 days later, but it was not what we expected. Instead of a rescue fleet, we detected a single small ship approaching the system. ZYX9471 looked around the chamber. The ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. It was from Dr. Helen Foster, a human female who had been a research scientist before the war. She said, "You wanted to see what happens when you hurt our families. Now you will learn." The alien's mandibles clicked nervously. Dr. Foster's ship looked harmless. It was an old research vessel with no visible weapons. Admiral Vex 882 ordered it destroyed, but our weapons could not lock onto it. The ship moved in ways that defied physics. He paused to take several deep breaths. Then Dr. Foster released her creation. She called them adaptive munitions. They were weapons that could change themselves to become more effective against any target. ZYX9471's voice grew stronger, but remained filled with fear. The first wave of weapons hit our outer patrol ships. They were simple explosives that did minor damage. But each weapon that hit a target sent data back to the others. The weapons learned from every impact. The Corellian looked directly at the council speaker. By the time the weapons reached our main fleet, they had adapted to penetrate our armor, disrupt our shields, and target our most vulnerable systems. Our ships began exploding in ways that should have been impossible. His head tilted downward. But Dr. Foster was not finished. She had created weapons that learned not just from success, but from failure. Every shot we fired at them made them harder to hit. Every defense we used made them better at breaking through. ZYX9471's voice dropped to a whisper. Admiral Vex 882 sent a distress call, begging for reinforcements. Before our backup fleet could arrive, Dr. Foster had destroyed 47 Corellian warships with a single research vessel. The aliens' breathing became more rapid. That was when we realized that humans did not separate their military from their civilians the way we did. Every human was a potential weapon. Every human scientist, engineer, or farmer could become a soldier when needed. He looked up at the domed ceiling. The human military response came 3 weeks later. Colonel Ryan Webb led a fleet of 200 ships to reclaim New Terra Colony. But these were not the converted civilian vessels we had seen before. ZYX9471's mandibles clicked rapidly. These ships had been designed specifically to fight Corellians. They knew our weaknesses, our tactics, our psychology. They had been built by humans who had studied every battle we had ever fought. The alien's voice became steadier. Colonel Webb's fleet moved through our defensive positions like they were not there. Our fortress stations, which had never been penetrated, fell within hours. Our minefields were cleared by robots that sacrificed themselves to create safe paths for human ships. He turned to face different sections of the audience. But the most terrifying thing was how the humans fought. They used something they called acceptable losses. They would sacrifice entire squadrons to achieve a single objective. ZYX9471's head drooped. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morgan led 12 ships against our main battle station. She knew it was a suicide mission. Her entire squadron would die, but it would open a gap in our defenses for the main fleet. The alien's voice grew quieter as her damaged ship approached the stations. Reactor core, Morgan broadcast a message to her crew. She said, "We die so that our people can live." This is what it means to be human. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. The explosion destroyed the battle station and all 12 human ships. But it also created the opening that Colonel Webb needed to complete his mission. Zix-9471's breathing made whistling sounds. We could not understand this behavior. No Carillion would willingly die for others. We fight to survive, not to sacrifice ourselves. But humans seem to think that dying for the right cause was an honor. The alien's voice became stronger. The recapture of New Terra Colony showed us another human characteristic that we found disturbing. They could fight in conditions that would kill any other species. He looked around the chamber. Private Danny Young and his unit were trapped in the ruins of Luna Station when the life support systems failed. The station was exposed to vacuum, with no atmosphere, no heat, and no gravity. ZYX-9471's mandibles clicked softly. Any normal species would have died within minutes. But the humans built makeshift life support systems from scrap metal. They created breathing apparatus from emergency equipment. They lived in those ruins for 6 months. The alien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And they did not just survive. They continued fighting. They launched attacks against our occupation forces using weapons they built from destroyed Carillion equipment. His 4 arms gestured weakly. Private Young's unit killed 43 Carillion soldiers and destroyed 2 of our supply depots while living in conditions that should have been impossible. When our forces finally retreated, the humans were still alive and still fighting. Zix-9471 looked directly at several council members. That was when our high command realized we were not fighting a normal war. We were fighting for our existence against a species that refused to accept defeat under any circumstances. The alien's voice became steadier. Admiral Krex 449 made one final attempt to end the war through conventional tactics. He gathered the largest Carillion fleet in our history, 800 battle cruisers supported by 2,000 smaller vessels. He paused for effect. The human fleet that met us at the Nexus system had only 300 ships. Admiral Krex 449 was confident that our superior numbers would finally give us victory. ZYX-9471's head tilted upward. The battle lasted for 18 hours. At first, it seemed like we were winning. Our superior numbers began to overwhelm the human defenses. Several human ships were destroyed or disabled. The alien's voice grew quieter. Then the humans did something that changed everything. They began rescuing our damaged ships. Several council members made sounds of confusion. While the battle was still raging, human medical ships moved through the combat zone. They pulled Carillion survivors from destroyed vessels. They provided medical care to wounded Carillion soldiers. Zix-9471's mandibles clicked rapidly. They saved lives of enemies who had been trying to kill them moments before. The alien looked around the room. This broke something in our warriors. They could not understand how to fight an enemy that would risk their own lives to save their victims. His voice dropped to a whisper. Some Carillion ships stopped fighting and began broadcasting surrender signals. Others became confused and fired on their own allies. The discipline that had made our fleet strong began to fall apart. Zix-9471's breathing became more rapid. Admiral Krex 449 tried to rally his forces by ordering the execution of human prisoners. But his own officers refused to obey. They said it was dishonorable to kill enemies who had shown mercy. The alien's voice became barely audible. That was when we understood the true horror of fighting humans. They did not just defeat us militarily. They made us defeat ourselves by showing us a different way of thinking about war. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. The Carillion Empire had been built on the idea that only the strong survive. The humans showed us that the strong could choose to protect the weak. This idea spread through our forces like a disease. Zix-9471 straightened his posture slightly. Within days of the Nexus System battle, Corellian commanders across the galaxy began questioning their orders. Some refused to attack human civilian targets. Others released human prisoners without authorization. The aliens' voice grew stronger. Our high command realized that they were losing control of their own military. The humans had not just won battles. They had changed the way Corellians thought about warfare itself. His head drooped again. That was when the high command made their final, desperate decision. If they could not defeat the humans through conventional warfare, they would try to eliminate the human species entirely. Zix-9471's voice dropped to a whisper. They prepared to use the extinction protocol. The Great Hall remained silent, but there was a new tension in the air. Every being in the chamber understood what those words meant. The silence in the council chamber stretched for almost a full minute. ZYX-9471 stood with his head bowed, his forearms wrapped tightly around his torso. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that the translation devices had to amplify. His words: "The extinction protocol was our most closely guarded secret. It was a weapon designed to destroy entire species by targeting their genetic structure. Once released, it would spread through the galaxy and kill every human being alive." The Corellians' multiple eyes darted around the room. Our high command believed it was the only way to stop the humans. They had seen what happened to our forces. They knew that conventional warfare would not work against an enemy that could turn our own thoughts against us. His mandibles clicked nervously. The weapon was stored in our most secure facility, deep inside the Corellian home system. It was protected by our entire reserve fleet and defended by automated systems that could destroy any approaching vessel. Zix-9471 looked up at the council speaker. "We thought it was impossible for humans to reach the weapon. They would have to fight through 7 star systems, defeat our strongest defenses, and somehow penetrate a facility that had never been breached." The alien's voice grew stronger. We were wrong. The humans did not try to fight their way to the weapon. Instead, they sent Admiral Susan Clark with a plan that we could never have imagined. He paused to take several deep breaths. Admiral Clark was a middle-aged human female with short black hair and calm eyes. She had been a diplomat before the war, not a military officer. Our intelligence reports said she was weak and inexperienced. ZYX-9471's head tilted slightly. She launched what the humans called Operation Prometheus. It was not a military attack. It was something much more dangerous. She was going to destroy our ability to think as a unified species. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. The humans had been studying our society for months. They knew that. Corellians followed a strict hierarchy. Every decision came from the top down. If they could disrupt our command structure, our entire civilization would collapse. His breathing made soft, whistling sounds. Sergeant Pete Johnson led a small team of human special forces soldiers. They did not attack our fleets or our planets. Instead, they infiltrated our command vessels and began assassinating our leaders. Zix-9471's mandibles clicked rapidly, but they did not kill random officers. They targeted specific individuals who were critical to our chain of command. Supreme Commander Krex Alpha was killed in his own quarters. Fleet Admiral Vex Prime died during a strategy meeting. Intelligence Chief Zix Beta was found dead in his secure office. The alien looked around the chamber. Within 2 weeks, 17 of our most important leaders were dead. But the humans did not stop there. They began spreading false information through our communication networks. His voice became steadier. The humans had learned to forge our identity codes and encryption keys. They sent fake orders to our fleets, telling them to attack each other. They created false intelligence reports that made our commanders suspicious of their own allies. Zix 9471's forearms gestured weakly. Our fleet commanders began to question every order they received. They did not know which messages were real and which were human deceptions. Some refused to follow any orders at all. Others attacked ships that were trying to help them. The alien's voice grew stronger, but Admiral Clark was not finished. She had prepared something that would destroy our society from within. She began releasing our prisoners. Several council members made sounds of confusion. The humans had been capturing Corellian soldiers throughout the war. We expected them to use these prisoners as hostages or sources of information. Instead, they did something we could not understand. ZYX9471's head drooped. They treated our prisoners well. The alien's voice became quieter. Human medical teams healed wounded Corellian soldiers. They provided food, shelter, and even entertainment. They allowed prisoners to contact their families and send messages home. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. When these prisoners were released, they told stories about human kindness that confused and demoralized our remaining forces. They said humans were not the monsters our propaganda had described. Zix 9471's breathing became more rapid. Captain Maria Santos was in charge of prisoner care. She personally ensured that every Corellian captive received medical treatment and respect. She learned our language and our customs so she could communicate with prisoners directly. The alien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Some of our released prisoners refused to return to active duty. They said they could not fight against an enemy that had saved their lives. Others began questioning why we were fighting at all. His mandibles clicked softly. This was psychological warfare at its most effective. The humans had turned our own people against us without using any weapons. They had shown mercy to their enemies and made those enemies their allies. ZYX9471 looked around the room. Colonel Tony Mitchell led the final phase of Operation Prometheus. While our command structure was collapsing and our prisoners were spreading confusion, he launched simultaneous attacks on 17 different star systems. The alien's voice grew stronger. These were not random attacks. The humans had identified our military academies, our communication centers, and our resource stations. They struck at the infrastructure that kept our empire functioning. His head tilted upward. But the most brilliant part of the plan was the timing. All 17 attacks happened at exactly the same moment. Our remaining commanders received reports of battles across the entire galaxy at once. ZYX9471's voice became steadier. Our military leaders panicked. They thought the humans had an enormous fleet that could be everywhere at once. They did not realize that the humans had been planning this for months, positioning small forces near critical targets. The alien's breathing made whistling sounds. Captain Alex Turner commanded the attack on our main communication hub. His force of 30 ships destroyed a facility that coordinated fleet movements across 12 star systems. Without that hub, our scattered forces could not work together. His multiple eyes closed briefly. In one day, Admiral Clark had accomplished what months of conventional warfare could not. She had broken our empire into fragments that could not communicate with each other or coordinate their actions. ZYX9471 looked directly at the council speaker. But the humans were not finished. They had one more surprise that would end our resistance forever. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. They began broadcasting something we had never heard before. It was the voices of our own prisoners, speaking in perfect Corellian, telling their stories of human kindness. His mandibles clicked rapidly. These were not forced confessions or propaganda. These were honest testimonies from Corellian soldiers who had been treated with respect and dignity by their human captors. Zix-9471's forearms trembled. Warrior Prime Kex 991 spoke about how human doctors had saved his life after he was wounded in battle. Communications Officer Vex 447 described how human guards had allowed him to contact his family and send messages to his children. The alien's voice became barely audible. Intelligence Specialist Zix 332 told how human researchers had shared their scientific knowledge with him, treating him as a colleague rather than a prisoner. His head drooped. These broadcasts reached every Carillion ship, every Carillion colony, every Carillion family. Our people began to understand that humans were not the evil monsters our leaders had described. Zix-9471 straightened his posture slightly. The final blow came when our own Supreme Commander, Crex Omega, was captured alive during a battle near the Carillion homeworld. We expected the humans to execute him or use him as a hostage. The alien's voice grew stronger. Instead, they invited him to negotiate a surrender. They offered to end the war if the Carillion Empire would agree to peaceful coexistence. They promised to help rebuild our damaged worlds and share their technology with us. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. Crex Omega was suspicious. At first, he thought it was a trap, but Admiral Clark showed him recordings of how human forces had treated Carillion prisoners and civilians throughout the war. ZYX-9471's voice became steadier. She showed him footage of human medical teams helping wounded Carillion soldiers. She played recordings of human commanders ordering their troops to protect Carillion civilians during battles. She demonstrated that humans could be ruthless in war, but merciful in victory. The alien's breathing made soft whistling sounds. Crex Omega realized that continued fighting would only lead to more death and destruction. The humans had proven they could defeat us militarily, but they were offering us a chance to survive and rebuild. His voice dropped to a whisper. But there was still one problem. The Extinction Protocol weapon was still armed and ready to fire. If any surviving Carillion commander activated it, billions of humans would die. Zix-9471 looked around the chamber one more time. That was when Admiral Clark made her final, most dangerous gamble. She was going to trust a Carillion to help save humanity. The Great Hall remained silent, but every being in the room was focused intently on the alien witness. The climax of his terrible story was approaching. ZYX-9471 stood perfectly still for nearly 2 minutes. His multiple eyes closed, and his breathing became shallow and rapid. The entire council chamber waited in absolute silence for him to continue. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. Admiral Clark's gamble was the most dangerous decision any military leader had ever made. She was going to trust me, a Carillion prisoner, to help her prevent the destruction of the human species. The alien's mandibles clicked softly. I was Communications Officer ZYX-9471, captured during the battle at Zarian Station. I had been held in human custody for 8 months. During that time, I had seen things that changed how I thought about war, about enemies, and about what it meant to be alive. His forearms relaxed slightly. The humans had treated me with kindness that I could not understand. They healed my injuries, fed me good food, and allowed me to send messages to my family. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the human medical officer, even learned basic Carillion biology so she could treat my species properly. Zix-9471's voice grew stronger. When Admiral Clark told me about the Extinction Protocol, I felt something I had never experienced before. I felt loyalty to my former enemies. These humans had shown me mercy, and now I wanted to help them survive. The alien looked around the chamber. The weapon was controlled by a single activation code that only Supreme Commander Crex Omega knew. But there was a backup system that could be accessed by any Carillion communications officer with the right clearance codes. His head tilted slightly. Admiral Clark needed me to help her reach the weapon facility and disable it before any surviving Carillion commander could use it. She was asking me to betray my own species to save the humans who had captured me. Zix 9471's voice dropped to a whisper. I agreed to help her. The alien paused to take several deep breaths. We traveled to the Carillion home system in a small human stealth ship. Admiral Clark brought only 12 soldiers with her. They were led by Captain Lisa Blake, the same woman who had escaped from our prison 3 years earlier. His multiple eyes focused on the council speaker. Captain Blake had volunteered for this mission, even though she knew it was probably suicide. She said she wanted to finish what she had started when she first escaped from Carillion custody. Zix 9471's mandibles clicked nervously. The weapon facility was protected by automated defense systems that would fire on any approaching vessel. But as a Carillion, I could broadcast the correct identification codes and convince the computers that we were a legitimate rescue mission. The alien's voice became steadier. The deception worked. We landed inside the facility without triggering any alarms. But we knew that human life signs would be detected within minutes. We had very little time to find and disable the weapon. His breathing made soft whistling sounds. Captain Blake and her soldiers moved through the facility like they had trained for this mission their entire lives. They knew exactly where to go and what to do. I realized that the humans had been planning this operation for months. ZYX9471 looked directly at several council members. We reached the central control room just as the facility's computers detected the human intruders. Alarms began sounding, and automated defense systems started activating throughout the building. The alien's voice grew stronger. I accessed the weapon control systems and began the shutdown sequence. But it required 2 authorization codes, and I only had one. The system needed confirmation from a Carillion command officer to complete the process. His head drooped. Admiral Clark looked at me and said something I will never forget. She said, I trust you to make the right choice. Then she handed me a communication device that would let me contact any surviving Carillion commander. ZYX9471's 4 arms trembled. I could have called for help. I could have warned our forces about the human infiltration. I could have ordered the immediate activation of the Extinction Protocol. Admiral Clark had given me the power to destroy humanity. The alien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Instead, I contacted Supreme Commander Crex Omega and convinced him to provide the second authorization code. I told him that continued fighting would only lead to the complete destruction of our species. His multiple eyes closed briefly. Crex Omega hesitated for several seconds. Then he gave me the code and said, May the ancestors forgive us for what we have done. The Extinction Protocol was permanently disabled. ZYX9471 straightened his posture. But our mission was not finished. The facility's defense systems were still trying to kill us, and Carillion reinforcements were approaching the system. Captain Blake led us through a fighting retreat that lasted for 6 hours. The alien's voice became stronger. During that retreat, I saw something that finally made me understand why humans were so dangerous in warfare. They were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect each other. His mandibles clicked softly. Private Bobby Green was badly wounded while covering our escape. Instead of leaving him behind, the entire squad risked their lives to carry him to safety. They treated a wounded comrade as more important than completing the mission. Zix 9471 looked around the chamber. In Carillion culture, wounded soldiers are left behind so the healthy ones can escape. It is logical and practical. But humans seemed to think that logic was less important than loyalty. The alien's voice grew quieter. We escaped from the facility, just as Carillion reinforcements arrived. But instead of attacking immediately, Admiral Clark broadcast a message to the approaching fleet. She told them that the extinction protocol had been disabled and offered to negotiate a complete ceasefire. His breathing became more rapid. The Carillion fleet commander was Admiral Vex-999, one of our most aggressive officers. He had lost his entire family in human attacks and wanted revenge. I expected him to order an immediate assault. Zix-9471's head tilted upward. Instead, Admiral Clark did something that broke the last of our resistance. She released me. Several council members made sounds of surprise. She could have kept me as a prisoner or hostage. I was the only witness to what had happened in the weapon facility. But she gave me a small ship and allowed me to return to my own people. The alien's voice was filled with wonder. She said, "Go home and tell your people what you have seen." ZYX-9471's mandibles clicked rapidly. When I reached Admiral Vex-999's flagship, I told him everything. I described how the humans had treated me with kindness. I explained how they had risked their lives to protect their wounded comrades. I testified about their mercy toward prisoners and their respect for enemy civilians. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. Admiral Vex-999 listened to my entire report. Then he contacted Supreme Commander Krex Omega and formally surrendered the remaining Carillion forces. His forearms relaxed completely. The war was over. In 3 years, the humans had destroyed the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But they had done it in a way that preserved the possibility of peace. ZYX-9471 looked directly at the council speaker. The humans could have exterminated our species. They had the weapons and the ability to hunt down every surviving Carillion. Instead, they offered to help us rebuild our shattered worlds. The alien's voice became stronger. Admiral Clark personally oversaw the reconstruction of Karos Prime. Human engineers worked alongside Carillion technicians to repair our damaged cities. Human medical teams provided care for refugees and displaced populations. His multiple eyes focused on different sections of the audience. But the most remarkable thing was how individual humans behaved during the reconstruction. They showed no hatred or desire for revenge. They treated former enemies as potential friends. Zix-9471's breathing made soft whistling sounds. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had cared for me during my captivity, established medical clinics on 12 Carillion worlds. Captain Lisa Blake helped design new communication systems that connected isolated Carillion colonies. The alien's voice grew quieter. I realized that humans did not fight wars the way other species did. They did not fight to conquer or destroy their enemies. They fought to prove that their way of life was worth defending. His head drooped slightly. The Carillion Empire had been built on the belief that only the strong deserve to survive. The humans showed us that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. ZYX-9471 straightened his posture one final time. That is why I stand before you today, honored counselors. Not as a conquered enemy, but as a witness to the most terrifying and wonderful species in the galaxy. The alien's voice became steady and clear. Humans are dangerous because they can show mercy to their enemies, while simultaneously being utterly ruthless in achieving their objectives. They fight not just to win, but to prove that compassion and strength can exist together. His mandibles clicked one last time. We thought we were apex predators. We discovered we were merely the latest species to learn that humans do not fight wars. They fight for the very concept of survival itself. And that, honored counselors, is why they are the most terrifying and most valuable species in the galaxy. The council chamber remained silent for several minutes after ZYX9471 finished speaking. Finally, the council speaker activated the voting system. The question was simple. Should humanity be granted immediate membership in the Galactic Council with full protection status? The vote was unanimous.